Hello everybody and welcome back to the Michigan Insider, michigan.247sports.com, our first fall camp report from right here outside the Michigan football facilities. I'm Alejandro Zuniga, that's Sam Webb. We just had the chance to talk to 4 stars on this 2024 Michigan football team. We talked to Will Johnson, Miles Hinton, Ernest Hausman, and Colston Loveland today. They've been recapping the first couple weeks of fall camp, which started July 31st. They've had 4 practices, I think 2 practices in pads. In fact, we've got some of the team rolling up right now behind us. But we got a chance to hear how the beginning of fall camp has gone after this coaching change, after a long summer, with a national championship to defend here in 2024. So let's start with the guy who's maybe the #1 star on the team. Certainly #1 in the eyes of EA is Will Johnson, #1 player in the country. What he had to talk about. What were your takeaways?
Yeah, so a couple of things, Alejandro. #1, he's using his voice. He's settling into his skin as a leader on this team. Like, he knows that with the departure of Mikey, with the injury to Rod, for instance, that, you know, and just in general, like, with his position, he has to be more of a vocal leader. I think he can lead by example, that goes without saying, but he has to say more, and I think he's settling into that. But the other thing that really stood out to me was him talking about Jair Hill. Like, one of the biggest questions heading into fall camp is who's going to be the guy lining up on the other side of him. And I think we all know that the leading candidate, not to say that he's been anointed as the guy, but the leading candidate is Jair. And Will was impressed. Yeah. Fair to say that he said, you know, he's not making the same mistakes. He said he's clearly been in his playbook. He's a guy who is making plays. He's more consistent, and he's making plays, and I think he's going to be able to be a playmaker for us. Now, to your point, it's only been 4 practices, so he has to show that consistency. You know, he has to stack that first days, then weeks, and then as they get deeper into fall camp, you know, and then get into games and do the same thing. So, but so far so good. With a lot of competition, you got Amir Hall, you got some other guys there, but so far so good for Jair Hill.
Yeah, he definitely took that next step so far. He's been a lot more reliable, knows the playbook really well. He's always in the right spot now, so I mean, he's a really athletic guy, and he's always around the ball, so he got a good chance at making a lot of plays this year.
Where's he made his biggest improvements from when he came as a freshman to now?
Just being consistent, knowing what he's supposed to be doing, not making the same mistake over and over. Yeah, just being a guy you can rely on and being consistent.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that Jair Hill, looking at what he did back in Kankakee, right? Looking at how he came to Michigan as a prospect, he's one of the guys with the highest ceilings, right? It's athleticism's there, the frame is there. It's can you put it all together? That's something Will Johnson was able to do at the end of his freshman year when he emerged on the scene, took it into a great sophomore year. Something you might expect from Jair too, right?
Yeah, Jair is a gift. He's a gifted athlete, freakish athlete. We saw in high school. He was one of the guys when we talked about in that recruiting class, who are some guys who can step up and surprise. And I picked Jair, and people were like, what are you talking about? He's a highly rated guy. My point was, I think he's a 5-star talent. He wasn't ranked a 5-star. He was a top 247 guy, which is why people were like, what are you talking about? It's like, no, he has 5-star athleticism. And so is that going to come out? We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. So if he can marry the mental with the physical, that's when it starts coming out, and that's what you're seeing shades of, but you got to see it consistently, and that's what we'll wait to see. And then the another guy he mentioned, I can't remember if it was your question. It was your question.
Yep.
It was your question. You were asking about the nickel, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Zeke Berry, and you asked him about Zeke Berry and Jay McBurrows, but he took the opportunity to talk a lot about Zeke Berry when you asked him that question.
Yeah, I would say Zeke's he's a very subtle, twitchy, fast, just playmaker. He's just a playmaker out there. And at the nickel spot, you want somebody that can be savvy and be a playmaker. So I think he's really good at that.
Yeah, I think Zeke Berry's another guy who falls into that mold, right? He was another guy who was a highly rated prospect, someone who's been at Michigan a couple of years longer. We haven't seen a whole lot out of him, but there are holes to fill on this defense, and nobody is going to step in and be Mikey Sainristil.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the type of player he was on the field, the way he was able to make the transition from offense to defense, but also the sort of intellectual player he was, right? He was the guy who was pointing out defensive formations. He was the guy who Jalen McMillan and your Marvin Harrison Jr.'s were complaining about, because Mikey Sainristil was the guy who had the whole playbook in his head, it seemed like, and was drawing up and was able to identify things. Zeke Berry, he's not going to get to that point, I don't think, but can he get to the point where he is consistent, where, as Wink said, you need a guy who is consistent, who can tackle. It is number one, can you tackle? That is what you need out of a nickel.
Yeah, Zeke, so the words that will twitchy, explosive, athletic, he can tackle, right? Really athletic. Makari used a frame of reference, he used Dax Hill. Like, and I'm like you. I feel like you got to temper that. Like you say, he's not gonna be Mikey. I'm not ready to say he's gonna be Dax Hill. But when you hear players and coaches kind of frame some of the what they're seeing, frame some of the comparisons in that way, when they talk about how he moves on the field, how fluid he is, how he reacts, it kind of gives you where some of the excitement comes from. And now you want to see is the cerebral part there. I do know this about Zeke. He understands that that's what sets a Mikey apart. Like that, he's trying to do it. He is making a conscious effort of, hey, this is how you become great. To have such a knowledge of the playbook to where you can diagnose what the other team is doing, right? And so you're right. I'm like you. Can we expect him to get to be Mikey Sainristil this year? That's not realistic. But do we know that this is now a guy who is not resting on his athleticism to get him across? I think we can know that and believe that's going to be something that helps him take a step in this fall camp to probably be the guy at nickel. Now, they're 4 games in. It's a competition with J-Mac. J-Mac, I know J-Mac can tackle.
Oh, yeah.
If nothing else, I know J-Mac is one of the biggest hitters on this team. Rest assured. But if we're handicapping it, which we can do, not the coaches, I think Zeke is the odds-on favorite to win that position.
Okay, we'll see. As we remember after the Michigan State game last year, I think they were interviewing Jaden McBurrows post-game, and Mikey comes in and says, this guy's next. So
he has the experience.
Plenty of time left. He has the experience. Yeah. As Will said, he's getting healthier. He's back in shape and all that after some bad injury luck. So hopefully he can keep that going to make it a competition throughout fall camp. Yeah. Speaking of health and getting players fit and people changing their bodies, had a chance to talk to Miles Hinton today.
Wow.
He's a guy who looks dramatically different than the first time I saw him transferring over here from Stanford. Kind of putting to rest any lingering concerns about the transition in strength and conditioning program, right?
Yeah, man. This is something to really focus on, I think. And one of the kind of the sneaky storylines to me. So Miles Hinton is up to 342 pounds, and he looks leaner
he does.
than when he got here. Crazy to say, right? He said, I want to get bigger, and he looks smaller. If that makes any sense. And then he talked about, I finally feel like I have that grown man strength. And this is a guy that had been in college 3 years before he got here.
Yeah, I feel like the biggest change I've made is offseason just getting, stronger. I feel I'm kind of coming into that, grown man strength kind of era. I feel like most of my college career I've kind of found my groove, get coordinated, because I feel like I kind of sprouted up there in high school, really fast. Wasn't super coordinated. I feel like I finally kind of found my feet, found my balance. But yeah.
And it made me think about Jayshawn Barham. So Jayshawn Barham was a standout at Maryland, had been in college a couple years, making plays, big-time player at Maryland. He comes here to Michigan at 233 pounds, and in a spring, he's 233 pounds on the spring roster. On Michigan's fall camp roster, he's 248 pounds, and everyone's talking about this guy is he's strong. He's just unbelievably strong. He's just throwing people around. It's like, wait a minute. How does a guy who's been in college a couple years in a college strength, not a high school guy, been in college, a college strength and conditioning program for a couple of years, come in and put on that much strength? Or a Miles Hinton, who's been in a college strength and conditioning program for a few years, come in and change his body, and now he has grown man strength? That's saying something to me about Michigan's strength and conditioning program, Alejandro, that, you know, maybe this will be a part of the difference in Miles Hinton, because I felt like pass pro, he was better pass pro last year than he was run blocking, and maybe this will be one of the things that unlocks another level of run blocking for him this year.
Yeah, it's to your point exactly. Is when we talked to people last year about Miles Hinton, what we heard from, you know, defensive tackles, from edge rushers, oh, Miles Hinton, he's just big, right? And not to denigrate him or, you know, to put him down. It was like, he's a big body to get around. He's talking about he is better on his feet, he's more agile, he's keeping that athleticism despite becoming stronger, bigger, and somehow a more compact package. He's the guy that it seems like he has one of the highest ceilings as an offensive lineman. It's can you put it all together? And obviously, we don't know that just from hearing practice reports, but it's something to keep an eye on this fall. Another thing to keep an eye on, of course, is the transition in defensive coordinators.
Yeah.
A third defensive coordinator from that Ravens mold now, the OG Wink Martindale. I think he's getting sick of hearing comparisons to Don Brown, Sam.
Yes, he is.
There's only so many different ways to ask the question, and you can just see his complexion change.
Yeah.
What are you hearing?
I think y'all are pissing Wink off. I think y'all are pissing Wink off. Definitely. I'm picking up that vibe. Whether it's Wink himself or some of his players, when you kind of ask them, and the questions are leading. I feel like the media has kind of read some of the well, hey, you know, all these, you know, if you're kind of sensing your Wink is playing more man, and like, no. Like, you can kind of see in the answers, like, no, that's not the case. And, you know, you kind of see him blitzing a whole lot more. It's like, well, we got some more blitz.
I don't think he has. I think we still got the same type of playbook. It's just going to be the way he calls it. I mean, I'm not sure how he's going to call it once he comes on to game day, but I wouldn't say there's been any difference of emphasis on just man or zone. Just we play all our calls and we try to execute them the best way we can.
So here is the long and the short of it. It's the same country, but sort of different areas from within the country.
Okay.
You know, they come from different sections of the country. They all have different habits, different customs within the country.
Okay.
They aren't from different countries.
We're talking Carolina barbecue versus Texas barbecue.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still good.
It's still good. So they all have their different spins on the same defense, but they aren't going off in concept. I think that's kind of if I can bring some analogy, if I can sort of analogize this in a way that makes sense, it's that they aren't deviating from the convention so far that these guys are like, this is not the same defense. It's the same defense with a different spin. Just like Mike McDonald, or just like Jesse Minter had the same defense with a different spin. Wink Martindale will say, this is my defense. McDonald just had a different spin on my defense. Yep. Minter just had a different spin on my defense. Now it's my defense, and you're going to see my spin on it, but you're going to see largely the umbrella be the same. So he might blitz a little more. He might play a little more man. He might run a little more sim pressure than those guys. But the terminology will be the same, right? I mean, the coverage variations on the back end will be the same. They got the amount of zone that they have in the amount of zone concepts that they have will be the same. It's just, hey, he might have a little more to it. He might have a little more pressure, a little more sim pressure that he mixes in. Simple as that. But it won't be Don Brown. If someone says Don Brown to Wink Martindale one more time, the man might cuss you out. He literally might come out around from the microphone just like this and smack you like I just simulated. You get about simulated pressure. I just smack Lance from around the camera.
We thought it was coming and it confused you, right? That's the point. He
might do that. So, anyway, yeah, that was a takeaway for me too. That and Colston Loveland, tunnel vision for C Love. Love, he's like, everyone's calling him the best tight end in the country. I believe that too. But a guy who is hyper locked in on, I still have something to prove.
Yeah.
I think it's just kind of what we do at Michigan. You know, we kind of block out all the noise, good or bad.
like you said, it's preseason, so like I haven't done anything yet. So
Yeah.
it's kinda,
And I think you can see that in his approach. I mean, we talked to him on Behind the Uniform. He's one of our guys that we have in studio, and you'll see it as we talk to him for over an hour, and that's the same thing that comes screaming through. He's like, look, I have a lot still to do.
Yeah.
I think he said, yeah, who wouldn't say I'm the best? Of course I'm gonna walk around thinking I'm the best. But am I gonna not apply myself? I'm not gonna work to take myself to another level? No, I'm never gonna settle in and rest on my laurels like I've already arrived. That's not me. And I think that's what he was getting at in there today.
Yeah, Colston Loveland from Gooding, Idaho. He's a guy who has not changed personality-wise, I think, a single bit since coming on campus. Obviously had a breakout end of his freshman year, but he's the same soft-spoken. He's never gonna reveal too much, but he's always gonna say the right thing in terms of the work he's putting in, the effort he's putting in, and the standards he sets for himself and his teammates.
And then Ernest Hausman,
Same way.
you know, yeah, a guy who second year in the defense, and that to me was what stuck out to me about him is you could tell he's a guy who's not thinking anymore. So now he's here 2 years and he knows where to be. He knows where everyone else is supposed to be on the defense. He was talking about having a responsibility as Mike Backer in this defense, and you can tell, even hearing him talk, that he's just much more comfortable in his skin in that role in this defense.
Yeah, it's going to be obviously a lot of fall camp left. We'll have several more of these in the coming weeks and months as Michigan approaches its 2024 season and then begins its national championship defense at the end of this month, August 31st against Fresno State. For Sam Webb, I'm Alejandro Zuniga here for the Michigan Insider, Michigan.247sports.com. We'll talk to you next time.